A wild ride. Once upon a time, in the hot desert city of Tucson, Arizona, there lived a 13-year-old girl named Tracie. Tracie was a damaged child, having been through a whole lot in her young life. Her father had left her family and then died when she was just 5 years old, and her mother had struggled to raise her and her older sister alone, so she married a man who would end up horribly abusing her children. Tracie had grown up too fast, taking on tasks and responsibilities that no child should have to bear. She lived with her mother and her older sister, both of which she loved yet was harshly judged by, and neither of which she trusted or felt safe with anymore. She was having a hard time waking up each day knowing there was more hurt in store for each one spent within those four walls with her family, but she had found a friend whose company helped make her world just a little brighter. Larry was an outcast too, though she never understood why, as he was a rare boy who actually cared about other people. He was really funny and would always make people laugh. He was just really fun to be around. One day, Tracie's good friend Larry was admitted to the hospital. Tracie went to visit her friend and couldn't stand watching him being there, as he seemed to be suffering it terribly and constantly begging her to get him out. He hated hospitals. On the second visit, she finally asked him what she could do to help. Larry told her, "Please, you've got to get me out of here. Just go to my house, climb in my bedroom window, and grab me a bag of clothes, my toothbrush, and deodorant, and bring it to me and we'll just take off. We'll go to Phoenix and have an adventure." She made a bold decision. She would break Larry out of the hospital and go on this adventure with him. Tracie did as Larry asked. She snuck into his bedroom window and got his clothes, toothbrush, etc. She brought his things to the hospital room. He got dressed, and they simply walked out of the front doors as if they had been visitors. They had run away. They walked a while and got to the truck stop where they hoped to find a ride to Phoenix. Fate had other plans for them. At the truck stop, they met a man who offered them some marijuana. Tracie had never tried it before, but she was feeling reckless and decided to indulge. The man then convinced them to drive cross-country with him to Orlando, Florida, promising Disney World. Tracie's gut feeling told her that this might be a bad idea, and now stoned, she couldn't resist the lure of such an adventure. Having her best buddy with her helped her feel safe enough, so she took the leap. To make the journey possible, the man convinced Tracie and Larry to tell lies to people, claiming that they were trying to get to Orlando to make it to their mother's funeral or get to her in the hospital there. So they told people these lies, asking for gas money and supplies, and people were surprisingly generous. After 6 days on the road, Larry's health deteriorated, and as they reached Jacksonville Beach, it took a quick turn for the worse. He was jaundiced and in terrible pain. Tracie knew they had to get him to a hospital, but they didn't have any money left to catch a cab or the bus, and the man they were traveling with refused to help. Tracie's gut feeling was that this was serious. She was very worried, but she knew she had to be strong for Larry. After a couple of hours failing to find someone willing to help, she begged some more and managed to talk the man into driving them to the hospital. Knowing she was a runaway and being afraid of being arrested, she went along with the man's plan, who was also adamant about avoiding the police, to drop Larry off at the front door of the emergency room and leave. Tracie got a wheelchair and took him inside, gave him a big hug, saying, "I'll see you again soon," and ran back to the car. They drove a little while and came to a 7-Eleven convenience store where the man purchased a bottle of liquor and began to drink, a lot of it. Tracie was frightened by his behavior as he became more and more belligerent. She knew she had to get away from him, but he wouldn't open the trunk for her to get her bag. She was finally able to grab her bag from the trunk, after convincing him that she needed to get a tampon. Then she ran from the man into the neighborhood, behind the store, hoping to find a safe place to hide. The man soon caught up with her, calling out her name with his head out the window as he inched through the neighborhood in his car. She noticed a cutout space in front of a large window of someone's home that was surrounded by bushes and hid there out of sight. She stayed there for several moments after she heard the vehicle drive away. She was nearly paralyzed with fear, and that, despite all she'd been through up until now, was the worst feeling that she'd ever experienced. In this moment, she understood that she never wanted to feel fear like this again. She learned a superpower this night. She learned to assess any situation that created fear or intense emotions, to discover what the best course of action would be, and then to steadily take the actions necessary to alleviate the danger or remedy the situation. This is a skill she'll use often in her life. When she thought the coast was clear, she sprinted back to the 7-Eleven to use the payphone to call for help, rather than call 911 and possibly be arrested for being a runaway. She decided she would call her mother, Collect. As she dialed, the man came up from behind her and grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the phone. She resisted and began to yell for him to let go of her. He ignored this and pulled harder, but she wouldn't let go of the phone or stop yelling and resisting. Just then, she noticed a smaller man about her height with long blonde hair running very quickly toward them from across the street. This man was about 1.5 feet shorter and considerably thinner than the man that had hold of her arm. The man kindly warned him 3 times to let the girl, or I'm going to have to make you let her go. The man, still gripping her arm, swung with his other arm at her rescuer and clocked him on the right side of his face. This smaller man moved like lightning, and with such grace, he grabbed the man's arm, hit him once with the palm of his hand, forcing him to let go of Tracie's arm, then flipped him over his body, putting him on his back on the ground. She stood there stunned, looking at her attacker on the ground as the smaller man kneeled beside him, holding onto his arm. She'd only seen shit like this in the movies. This was freaking awesome! This smaller man was a freaking hero. She was very impressed and quite grateful. She later learned that he was an avid studier of martial arts and held the highest belts in several of them. He then poked his head inside the door, asking the clerk, who he was well acquainted with, "Hey, Nan, would you please call the boys and tell them there's a man out front that needs the drunk tank for the night?" "Thanks, hun." Tracie thanked him profusely. The blonde-haired man introduced himself as Jimmy and offered to help her. He took her to his brother and sister-in-law's apartment just across the street where he was staying for the night. They were so kind and accepting of her, offering her a meal and a sofa bed to sleep on. This was all new to her. She had never been simply accepted by people she didn't know before. Tracie was really hungry and felt very grateful for their hospitality and for the safety they made her feel. The next day, Jimmy and his brother invited Tracie to their parents' house for lunch and a proper shower. The 3 of them had a plan to shower and have lunch at the parents' house since their own shower was needing repair. She was nervous as they drove around this beautiful neighborhood with such big, beautiful homes. She'd never been to a neighborhood like this before, let alone inside of a mansion. The man who answered the door and let them in was an actual butler. Walden was his name. She was really excited, and yet the feeling of unworthiness overshadowed the excitement of this part of the adventure for her. This place had so many rooms, and it was so opulent and beautiful, although much too large for her taste. Jimmy walked her to a room and asked her if she had everything that she needed for her shower. She asked for a hairdryer and a curling iron, which both happened to be in the top drawer of every bathroom, all 11 of them, 9 in the house and the 2 in the pool house. She was looking forward to showering and getting her hair fixed up right for the first time in a week. Feeling something like herself again, she finished and made her way with little trouble to the formal dining room downstairs, where everyone was gathered for lunch. She thought it was so cool how they told her to just order what she wanted like a restaurant. Tracie asked for a cheeseburger and french fries. She promptly felt a tinge of regret while listening to everyone else order crab, lobster, and something called fragua. She later learned that this was duck liver. Yuck! As they all sat around one end of this giant oval table talking with each other and enjoying their meal, she thought to herself, a family like this is what I want one day. They were so close and loving toward each other. Listening to the conversations, Tracie learned that Jimmy's father was the chief of police in Jacksonville Beach. He strongly encouraged her to call her mother. She told him that she planned to, knowing very well that she did not. She got very nervous and worried that she may be arrested and sent back home. She definitely never wanted to know what the inside of a jail cell looked like. After finishing her meal and listening to more conversation, she excused herself to use the restroom, taking her bag with her. On her way through the huge kitchen, she saw a rack by a back door that held mail and some business cards for the chief of police, so she grabbed 2 of them, wrote Jimmy's number on the back of one so she wouldn't forget it, and put them both in her bag. Tracie found a first-floor bathroom that happened to have French doors to the outside. She decided that she would leave through these doors. Feeling bad that she was leaving without even a goodbye to these wonderfully kind people, she decided to leave a note expressing her gratitude for their generosity, kindness, and the safety they made her feel. She wrote it on the back of one of the business cards and left it on the bathroom counter. Being up on a hill, she could see the beach in the distance, so she began walking that way. She eventually made it to the pier that she had seen in the distance. It got so much larger as she got closer. There was a lot of activity on this pier, and around it, there were shops and places to eat, picnic tables, people with carts selling trinkets, toys, treats and snacks, benches where people sat and watched others, people performing, a juggler, a unicyclist, a really tall person on stilts dancing in psychedelic clothes, even a psychic with a crystal ball, and tarot cards. It kind of felt like a circus without the animals, though there were a lot of dogs and tons of seagulls. Again, this was something else she'd only ever seen in movies. Underneath this pier, was a small group of older men sitting around a table with a chessboard on it, smoking cigars, a few groups of young people, some just hanging out, some playing music, some actually playing instruments, some dancing, and all of them just generally looking like they were enjoying life. A few of them said that they were homeless and just lived on the beach. She met a girl named Amy who was 19 years old. She had been living on the beach for 4 months and was describing the ins and outs. She offered to help her figure it out, and they could even stay together. There's safety in numbers, she said. Tracie decided that living on the beach was to be her next adventure. For the next 2 weeks, Tracie lived on this beach. Saw with Amy for the first 3 days, but then Amy became very mentally unstable and got in a fight with police, which prompted her arrest. It was miserable living on a beach. Underneath the pier was the only way to stay out of the sun. She had learned the hard way that there is no way to escape the sand when you live on a beach. Tracie never saw Amy again. Finally, quite tired of being always hungry, losing a good majority of whatever food she was able to get to the aggressive, thieving seagulls, and being unable to escape the sand, she decided to call Jimmy. Even knowing that she'd probably have to call her mother and end up going home, she was willing to do almost anything, even this, if that's what it took to get out of the sand. She wasn't quite ready to go home, but she was quite ready to get off of that beach. He came right over to the pier, picked her up, and brought her to his parents' house. They welcomed her back warmly, and she apologized for leaving the way she did, explaining that she felt she had to or she would have to go home, and home being a place of stifling pain for her was the last place she wanted to go. Though she didn't trust or respect either of them at the time, she did love and miss her mother and sister. She washed up again in the same room that she had before, only this time she would have dinner and then get to sleep in this huge, beautiful room. The police chief asked that she kindly do not sneak away again, just get a good night's sleep and we'll talk about the next steps in the morning. Walden, their wonderfully kind butler, brought her the softest, silkiest pajamas she'd ever seen and took all of her clothing to the laundry, promising to rid it all of sand. The bed was amazing, like sleeping on a cloud. Waking up the next morning in that room was like a dream. She felt very unworthy of any of this. As promised, the police chief started the conversation at breakfast. Tracie tried to explain the situation to him the best she could while trying to leave out the sensitive details. Even though he said he understood, she knew he couldn't have possibly because she left out way too much. He insisted that she call her mother to at least let her know that she was okay. They finished breakfast and he handed her the phone. She started to cry. Jimmy pulled his chair up right next to her, put his arm around her back, and told her that he would do whatever he needed to do to make sure that everything would be okay for her, even speak to her mother if she wished. She finally dialed the phone number, and her mother eagerly answered the phone, as if she knew it would be Tracie. They spoke for a bit, her mother expressing how worried she'd been and scolding her for doing this to her. During the call, Tracie's grandfather arrived at her mother's house and took the phone from her mother. He got his scolding in and then told her that he'd be sending her a bus ticket to come home. He then asked to speak with the police chief. She handed him the phone and they spoke for a bit, making arrangements for Tracie to stay there until the ticket got there the next day. Tracie's got her bus ticket the next morning, departing only 3 hours after receiving it, and she embarked on a 5-day journey back home to Tucson. Tracie felt changed by her experience, having learned some hard lessons about trust and survival. She hoped that Larry would recover and that they would stay friends. She wondered if their wild adventure had come at too great a cost. As she sat on the Greyhound bus, she reflected on the experiences of the past few weeks. She felt a mixture of emotions, excitement, joy, wonder, fear, regret, and gratitude, yet happy that she'd had these experiences. She had been so determined to help her friend, but their actions had put them both in danger. She knew that she had made some poor decisions along the way, but she also knew that she had to be strong and resourceful to keep them both safe and alive. Tracie wondered what would happen to the man who had convinced them to drive cross-country with him. She hoped that he would be held accountable for his actions. If by nothing else, then his own sense of morality. She wondered if and prayed that Larry was okay and that he made it home safely back to his mother. As the bus made its way across the country, Tracie thoroughly enjoyed every moment of scenery and got out to explore at every single stop they were allowed to step off at. While watching cities and towns go by out the window, she thought about the kind people she had met along the way. She felt grateful to Jimmy and his family for their help and support even after she had split the way she did. She also realized that she had a lot to be thankful for back home: her family, her friends, and a home to live in. When Tracie finally arrived back in town, she was greeted by her mother, sister, and grandfather at the bus station. They were relieved to see her, and her sister was especially eager to hear about her adventure. She decided that she would tell them the truth about what had happened, no matter how difficult it might be. Over the next few weeks, she focused on getting back to her normal routine. She went to school, spent time with her friends, and tried to put the scary events of her trip behind her. Though she knew that she had been forever changed by the experience, she tried in vain to contact Larry, and his mother was never home and wouldn't return her calls. She never spoke with him again, or even found out if he ever made it back home. She felt very guilty for taking him on this crazy adventure, but she also knew that she had done everything she could to help him. In the end, she learned some important lessons about trust, survival, and the importance of family and friends. She knew that she would never forget her wild journey across the country, but she also knew that she was happy to be back home in the city that she loved. As time passed, Tracie began to understand exactly what had been going on with Larry from the start. He had kidney failure due to type 1 diabetes. She had to come to terms with that and the events of her wild adventure. She now realized that she had taken a big risk by running away with Larry in the condition he was in, and that her actions could have, and even may have had very serious consequences. She wondered if she'd ever hear from Larry again. She also felt proud of herself for being brave, resourceful, and especially of the useful superpower she discovered in the face of danger. One day, Tracie was walking home from school when she heard a familiar voice calling her name. She turned around to see Jimmy, the man who had helped her in Jacksonville Beach. Jimmy told Tracie that he was passing through Tucson on his way to California and he wanted to take her out to dinner to catch up. She agreed to dinner, and he brought Kentucky Fried Chicken to her house. As they sat eating, Jimmy told Tracie and her family about his own adventures and the lessons he had learned along the way. He encouraged her to follow her dreams and to never be afraid to take risks. She listened to Jimmy's stories with fascination, and she began to realize that there was a whole world out there waiting to be explored. She felt inspired and excited, and she knew that she would never forget the lessons she had learned on her wild adventure. In the end, Tracie realized that her adventure had been about much more than just helping Larry, who so desperately wanted out of that hospital. It had been a journey of self-discovery, of learning to trust herself and others, and of finding the courage to take risks and trust her own capabilities. She knew that she was ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. Several months later, she realized that she would have to let go of her dreams and wild adventures, but in doing so, she'd be embarking on the most important and best adventure yet: motherhood. She never did hear from or about Larry ever again, and she still thinks of him, wondering if he made it home safely. I hope you enjoyed these Reddit stories. Remember to like and subscribe, and come back for more.